It's time for another mod battle, the series where I save you some time and hassle by downloading and playing a bunch of similar mods so I can tell you which ones are worth using and which should be avoided like the plague. This time though, we're not jumping into the world of Fallout 4. Instead, we're going to look at some mods for Mount & Blade Warband, a game that was released over 12 years ago. But hey, some people are still playing it, and I'm sure they're looking for new and interesting modules that they haven't tried yet. And what could be more interesting than taking a medieval sandbox game forward in time hundreds of years into the 19th century, which is about as late as you can reasonably get with Warband's engine. When you start moving into World War I and later, obviously horses become less important and you need to add vehicles which don't work very well in this engine. But I digress. My criteria for this mod battle was single-player mods only, and they had to be set in the real world sometime during the 1800s. I also only picked mods for Warband, not the original Mount & Blade or Mount & Blade with Fire and Sword. Those criteria narrowed down the mod list quite a lot, although I'm sure there's some obscure mod somewhere that I missed. That's okay, I can't cover everything. There are two big mods that I will not be talking about, and those are 1860s Old America and L'Aigle. L'Aigle? I don't know how to pronounce it, but both of those mods have been abandoned for years. I won't be talking about them because there are more recent releases that use the same assets. With all that babble out of the way, let me list off the mods I looked at, and then, as always, tell you which one I would recommend before discussing them all in detail. I played Napoleon Conquest Europe, L'Aigle Grand Armee, American Civil War Revived, Independence of Chile, Rising Sun Bakamatsu, and Between Empires. Of these, the only mod I would actually recommend is Rising Sun Bakamatsu. Every single other mod on this list either has massive problems or is mediocre by comparison. Unless you don't like the mod's Japanese setting, I see no reason to try anything else. There are a few minor problems with Rising Sun, but it's by far the best mod on this list, and you'll see why when I start talking about the other mods. I'll start with Napoleon Conquest Europe. I played this mod for a few hundred in-game days, and the best thing I have to say about it is that it's mostly functional. I never had any crashes or performance problems, and the mod doesn't fundamentally break any of native Warband's features. It does have some odd quirks, however. For example, it begins with an option to select your difficulty, but I didn't notice any difference between these three settings, easy, medium, and hard. They were all the exact same. I don't have any information on what these settings do or what they're supposed to do. I would say just choose medium to be safe. Character creation is mostly the same as native, but you can choose to start as a mercenary for either France or a few other factions, which is interesting. A strange oversight is that the shield skill is still present despite there not being any shields to loot or buy, as far as I've seen. Also, the firearms proficiency doesn't work. It's your crossbow proficiency that determines your accuracy with muskets, so putting points in firearms is useless. Another interesting thing is that there is no longer any troop wages to pay at the end of the week. I thought this might be related to the difficulty setting, but I tried it again on hard and easy, and no matter what difficulty you're on, you don't have to pay any upkeep for your troops anymore. And this makes the game's economy a hell of a lot easier. You can also recruit high-level troops straight from towns and even go above your party limit, which also makes things quite a bit easier. Looking at the campaign map, you'll see there's a good variety of factions, and most of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa are represented here. The factions might not be completely accurate in their starting positions, but after a few hundred days the map will get messed up and you'll be conquering things anyways, so it doesn't really matter. The factions all have their own unique troop trees, and there is a troop tree viewer from the reports menu. It doesn't let you see the exact equipment and stats of the troops though. Battles have about as much strategy as the vanilla game. Just form your troops into a line and send the cavalry into the rear of the enemy, and it will be a slaughter fest. One interesting tidbit is that this mod doesn't let you zoom in for whatever reason, so shooting from a distance can be slightly more difficult, but it's not a big deal. In terms of graphics, things look okay. Uniforms and weapons are modeled and textured to a respectable quality. They don't look nearly as good as some of the other mods I'll be covering later, but they're not ugly and distracting. What is distracting is that most of the scenes are taken straight out of native Warband, so you'll be besieging medieval castles and recruiting troops from medieval-style taverns. Even though this is supposed to be the Napoleonic era, there are still jousting tournaments, and this wooden fort is supposed to be the city of Rome. Only a few French towns actually have unique scenes made for them, but these don't look very good either. They're just a bunch of buildings placed on hilly ground. Look over there, that's supposed to be the Arch of Triumph. It's pathetic. Another problem I noticed is companions no longer quarrel with each other like they're supposed to. They only seem to get angry at the player, which doesn't make any sense. In fact, a lot of dialogue seems to be scrambled and incomprehensible. I've also noticed that the merchants at Rome are bugged. For whatever reason, you get the buy screen of the wrong NPC from the menu. When you select the goods merchant, you'll get the horse merchant's inventory instead. I don't know why this happens, but it only seems to happen in this one town, so it's not a huge problem. What else? This mod doesn't feature diplomacy or freelancer. It doesn't have any unique quests or game mechanics. It's very, very similar to native. So, it's nothing to write home about, but it's not the worst mod on this list. That would be this next mod, Vaegir Grand Armee, an Alpha 1.0 version of somebody's attempt to revive the original Vaegir mod, which hasn't been updated in over 7 years. Unfortunately, this new mod does nothing to improve the original. It's still the same disappointing mess that I remember it being all those years ago. In fact, it's actually worse. The only positives I can think of are the incredible visuals. The uniforms and weaponry look absolutely amazing. The new animations for muskets are great, and the plumes of smoke particles that appear as your troops fire volleys look beautiful. You can walk around detailed towns that actually look like they're from the Napoleonic era, and tournaments have been removed and replaced with more thematically appropriate prize-fighting rings. But that's where the good ends. Character creation is the same as native, and once again, the shield skill has been left in, along with the archery proficiency. There are no shields, nor bow and arrows to be found in this mod, so investing points in these categories is like throwing your money into a furnace, or giving it to my Patreon. The starting quest has been edited slightly to involve a duel instead of being attacked in an alley randomly, but other than that, it's the same as vanilla. Getting into the world map itself, you'll notice that half of it is empty. All of Scandinavia, the Balkans, Anatolia, the Middle East, North Africa, and Iberia are devoid of fiefs to conquer and factions to fight. You can still go to these areas and kill bandits though, but it's a real disappointment to have these areas be empty. When you start fighting battles, you'll quickly notice something really terrible. Unlike vanilla Warband, which has a random scene generator that gives you a new terrain to fight on every single time you start a battle, Vaegir, for whatever reason, removes this system and replaces it with a handful of pre-made scenes, and you will quickly see all of them. I hope you enjoy fighting the exact same battles with bandits on the exact same maps for hours on end, because that's all you're going to be doing, and you will get tired of it very quickly. There are also only 1 or 2 siege scenes repeated for every single town and castle on the map, but that's more understandable. But all of that is the same as it was 7 years ago. What has this updated version actually added? Not much. And it's completely fucked up the economy. All items and troop wages are now 100 times the cost because the guy who did this update wanted to replace francs with centimes. I don't know why. But it would have been okay if he also changed quests to give 100 times the reward. But as you can probably guess, he didn't. So you can forget about doing quests to make money. You would have to do 30 quests just to afford a loaf of bread. And you can forget about winning prize fights to get money. The payouts there haven't been increased either. The only way to earn the 150,000 centimes needed to start a bakery is to fight bandits for hours on end. And I could not endure playing long enough to even reach that point. I appreciate the amount of effort the original author put into making all of these models and textures, but this mod sucked 7 years ago and it still sucks today. End of story. Let's move on to the next one. Halfway through the list now, we have American Civil War mod, Revived. This mod is kind of okay. I could see myself spending some time with this one. Character creation and the starting quest are the same as native, so there's not much to talk about there. The visuals are not nearly as pretty as Vaegir, but they get the job done. Taverns seem to be the same as vanilla, but towns actually do look like American frontier towns or Native American settlements. The map features both the Union and the Confederacy, as well as some Plains Indian tribes. For some reason, the Union and Confederacy were split up into 5 different factions. I don't know why, but there might have been an AI issue that necessitated that. It doesn't matter that much because factions can't make peace with each other or change alliances, which makes perfect sense in a mod about the Civil War. Obviously, the Union and Confederacy can't team up. That would be insane. Parts of Mexico and the Caribbean are also on the map, but there are no factions present there, sadly. Battles here have even less strategy than the vanilla game. The enemy seems to always charge directly into your lines, and it all comes down to troop composition, whether you win or not. I suppose it's okay. One interesting thing is you take tons of damage when being hit, so for the sake of enjoyment, I'd recommend turning damage to player down as far as you can. My biggest issue with this mod is something very simple. You can't crouch. Apparently the person who made this mod believes that soldiers in the American Civil War didn't crouch during battles, which I find hard to believe, but I'm not a historian. All I'll say is, for the sake of gameplay, it would be nice if I could crouch behind a rock or my horse to block incoming fire. Another major issue is stability. I didn't notice any crashes in the few hours that I played this mod, but many people have reported random crashing unless they turn down their graphics settings. I didn't have to do that though. Apparently there are a couple of siege scenes that reproducibly crash the game, so for that reason alone, I would hesitate to recommend this mod. I don't have much more to say about it. It's an okay experience. Just like the previous mods, there's no diplomacy, integration, but there is Freelancer, which lets you join a general's army as a soldier, and you can move up the ranks, and you'll earn a salary every week. That can be a good way to make some money in the early game. Other than that, there's nothing special about this mod. On to the next one. The 4th mod on my list is Independence of Chile, and this one is probably a lot more stable than the last, but it's still mediocre. Character creation is the same as native, just like every other mod before this. It's strange that the archery proficiency was removed even though bows are still in the game, but whatever. Every other mod I've covered so far has fucked up the skill chart, and this one certainly isn't bucking the trend. The world map is very unique. I've never seen a South American setting before in Mount and Blade. The map contains large parts of Argentina, Chile, and Peru, with several factions representing the Spanish colonial forces as well as independence fighters and natives. Every faction has its own troop trees, and there's even a troop tree viewer that gives you very detailed info on each unit. The troop tree viewer in Napoleon Conquest Europe wasn't nearly as good as this one. Graphically, this mod is behind every other one on this list, with the exception of maybe Napoleon Conquest Europe. Scene quality is relatively high, with towns looking very suitable, but on the other hand, uniforms and weaponry look very bad, and audio quality especially is extremely poor. I could hear the yelling of my troops as if it was right next to me, even when I was riding far away, which was extremely annoying. I had to mute the audio because it was so bad. Battles are about as good as they were in Napoleon Conquest Europe, which is to say there's nothing special to see here. The biggest problem is you can't continue a battle after you get knocked out, which really sucks. If you're going to play this mod, it would be best to stay back with your troops and try not to get hit at all, or you could play with a low damage to player setting. Once again, there's no diplomacy, no freelancer, no quality of life features at all, besides the troop tree viewer. I can't think of much more to say about this mod. I thought it was an okay experience aside from the audio bug I had. This is actually the second best mod on the list, which shows you how slim the pickings are. Let's move on to a mod that's actually good. Rising Sun Bakamatsu is better than all the other mods on this list combined. Starting with character creation, not much has changed from vanilla, but a new skill has been added, foraging, to replace the shield skill. This allows your party to forage food from the forests so you don't have to buy as much from towns. Very useful. The campaign map looks absolutely beautiful. It features all of Japan and even a bit of Korea, although the Korean part of the map looks like an afterthought that was added later. There are well over a dozen factions to choose from, and they each have their own unique troop trees which you can view, just like in Independence of Chile. This mod also features diplomacy integration, which adds tons of features, far too many for me to list off in this comparison video. But as an example, factions can broker alliances and non-aggression pacts with each other. Since this mod has so many factions, you might notice stuttering on the campaign map every once in a while, which I think is due to diplomacy, although since battles aren't affected by this stutter, I don't think it matters much. In terms of graphics, they're not on quite the same level as Vaegir, but they're damn close. And considering the much greater quantity of apparel and weaponry present in this mod, the quality is very impressive. Town scenes also look very good, but you won't be seeing them as much since you can actually talk to the guildmaster from the town menu now. Annoyingly, you still have to manually go into the town and meet him properly the first time. You also need a positive relationship with the town before you can build an enterprise, so either do a quest or buy a drink for everyone at the tavern to get around that new requirement. Battles are excellent. The AI is smart enough to actually use formations to some degree and not just mindlessly charge at you. Combat animations have been remade to fit the Japanese setting. There's new death animations that look better than native. It's all great stuff. I don't like how you can't issue orders after you get knocked out and your troops are forced to charge, but at least there's a working free camera after you get knocked out. Another problem is there aren't enough unique siege scenes to cover all of the dozens of castles and towns on the map, so you'll be seeing the same sieges many times over if you want to conquer the entirety of Japan. This problem certainly isn't exclusive to this mod, though nearly every mod is going to reuse scenes since they're very difficult to make. I don't think it's that big of a deal. After the battle is over, a new quality of life feature is automatic item gathering and selling. No longer do you have to click on every single item in the loot pool, go to a town, and tediously sell everything. You can set it up to happen automatically, and you can even let your companions take first pick of the loot. Just like the American Civil War mod, Freelancer is integrated so you can join a lord's party and move up through the ranks, earning money each week and getting to fight in big battles without having a party of your own. This mod is absolutely awesome. It's not only the best 19th century mod for Warband, it's one of the best mods for the game, period. The last mod I'll be covering is the most disappointing of all, because it could have been amazing. When I first saw the ModDB page for Between Empires, I was floored. This mod features a timeline stretching from the 1860s all the way up to World War I, with factions upgrading their troop trees automatically as the years go by. There's an RTS-style camera that lets you direct the battle from above like in Total War. Units have morale and can be made to flee by artillery and volley fire. I was promised in-depth kingdom management and a totally reworked economic system. I was stoked to play this mod. And then, it turned out to be a piece of shit. Okay, just kidding. Let me go through my experience with this mod and how I turned from impressed to disappointed very quickly. I liked how during character creation you can choose to start as a ruler of a faction, skipping the early and mid-game completely and getting straight into the meat of the experience. You can also choose multiple start dates that change around the borders of the map and technological progress. When I first loaded into the mod, I was amazed. There are so many factions, so many towns on the map, it's unbelievable. Graphically, this mod tops Vaegir while having easily 5 times as much content. Getting into my first battle and learning to use the RTS camera was a treat. I noticed that unlike every single other Mount & Blade mod, the AI were no longer forced to face the enemy, so proper envelopment tactics were possible for the first time. I was impressed by the enemy army's behavior. They acted more intelligently than any mod I had ever seen. I was amazed by the working artillery system. In later start dates, you can even use howitzers and fire mustard gas. Even more impressive is the trenches, actual functional trenches in a Mount & Blade game. It's insane. I was kind of perplexed by the health regeneration during battles, but hey, it's good for lamers like me who suck ass at video games. No matter how you slice it, battles truly are as amazing as promised. But after getting knocked out and letting my troops finish my first battle for me, a terrible bug occurred. Once I got back into the campaign map, I realized my character wasn't in my party anymore, meaning my progress had effectively been soft-locked. I couldn't fight battles anymore since my character no longer existed. This bug is caused by being unconscious and in the RTS camera when a battle ends. If you want to play this mod, make sure you disable realistic saving, and save often in multiple slots or you will eventually lose all your progress. After restarting with a new character, I started to notice even more problems. That huge campaign map I praised has some issues. For example, this village in Scandinavia, Karlstad, is unreachable by any means except cheating. I had a quest here and I was screwed. The next thing that I noticed is village and town scenes have been completely removed. Villages are now empty plots of land and you can't walk around towns at all. This by itself is not really a bad decision, but what they replaced the Guildmaster with is far worse than what existed before. There are now factories that you can build and invest in, but how exactly this system works, I couldn't tell you. Whether these factories actually produce the goods that you can buy in towns, and if shortages increase the price or reduce supply, is unclear. There's a menu to manage the internal politics of your faction. There are different political parties, a budget to balance, and I have no clue how this shit is supposed to work. Playing with sliders in the kingdom and industry management screens makes me feel like I'm playing Victoria 2. I don't know what effect I'm having, and to be honest, I'm probably not having any effect at all. Whether I set the army spending to 100% or 0%, I still have a massive budget surplus, so why should I ever set it to less than 100%? I suppose you need a high IQ to understand this mod, and the online test said I only have 83. There's a population mechanic, but recruiting soldiers doesn't do anything to reduce a region's population, or the number of workers in the factories. There's a technology tree, you can choose what to research, but it's out of your hands when the tech actually finishes researching. I think it's based on your country's overall literacy, and maybe you can fund education to slowly increase that stat. I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with all these shitty mechanics. The campaign AI is broken. Enemy lords rarely band together and often seem to get lost. You can siege castles practically unopposed. I wouldn't be surprised if lords are getting stuck in the terrain somewhere. Here's something interesting I didn't notice immediately. Face morphs for male characters are completely broken, which means that every single male character in the game has the exact same face. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Female face morphs do work, but despite this, all ladies have the same face as well. I've had massive stability issues with this mod. Until I turned down my graphics settings, it kept crashing every 10 minutes. Some people said that using Warband Script Extender 2 fixes the crashes, but I was using it in the first place, and I was still crashing. I'm not sure what setting makes the game crash, but having to play with shitty graphics was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Unless this mod gets another update, I do not want to play it ever again. In summary, this mod's battles are incredible, but everything else is a broken, incomprehensible mess. This mod would be so much better if the bugs and crashes could be fixed and the garbage paradox mechanics removed. It was so close to being something amazing, but the developers screwed it up. And that's all he wrote. I hope this video helped you out, or at least saved your drive some write cycles. Until next week, toodles!